All right, very good morning, students. So we are now going to talk about a new technology, which is protein microarrays. Earlier, we had discussed at quite length about sample preparation, gel-based proteomics, and much more focus was on the mass spectrometry-based proteomics. Different techniques we talked: label-based, label-free, using mass spec approach. Now, what we are talking is about other technologies which could be helpful for understanding the function of the protein, interaction of the protein. So in this slide today, I'm going to talk to you about broadly protein microarrays. But before that, I'll touch upon briefly the traditional approaches of looking for interaction or interactomics, which is immunoprecipitation, yeast-2 hybrid. And then we will try to provide you the overview of one of the technology, nucleic acid programmable protein arrays, or the NAPA. So with this, while some of you would have already studied conventionally that there are different traditional approaches of using or studying protein-protein interactions, which includes immunoprecipitation (IP), quite popularly known, affinity chromatography-based methods, and yeast-2 hybrids. These are traditional approaches people have been using in biochemistry from long time. Now, given the need to look at the interactors or potential protein drug or protein-protein interactions at much larger scale, and by using very minimal volume of the samples, uh, then the need was that can we look at high throughput approaches, and that's where we got new technologies emerging, which is protein as well as some of the label-free approaches. Now here also, we are talking about two broad categories: label-based methods. So protein microarrays are essentially label-based methods because you have to use some way of visualizing the signal. So some fluorophores has to be there tagged with the proteins of interest, or your reaction should have some way of readout. Label-free biosensors are something like where you would not like to label the proteins to identify the signal, but rather you can utilize the physical properties of the proteins or the biomolecules themselves and see is there any interaction happening. So this part I will be very quickly just browsing through to refresh you what you have already learned earlier, and I'll focus more on to high throughput approaches, which is comes under the proteomics, and talk in detail about protein microarrays and some of the label-free biosensors in the upcoming lectures. So immunoprecipitation idea is that if a protein of interest, let's say in this case, this protein is antigen A, which is of your interest. You have identified from mass spectrometer that this protein A is quite important as a top hit of your, lead what you identified from your metabolist and orange and all kind of analysis. You want to know that what is the function of this protein, what is the potential role of this protein, and there is not much known about this protein in literature. So you are trying to look at this protein belongs to or interacts with which other type of binding partners. And if there is something known about those partners, then you can at least get some estimate that this protein may have potential role like the interactors what it has, or maybe belonging to those pathways where all these interactors are forming the complex. So therefore, people look for the possible interactors. In this case, for the protein A, which is of your interest, you need to have an antibody. Let's say you got anti-protein A antibody, which is available. And then you are looking at, let's say from the tissue sample or complex cell lysate sample, this protein should be present over there in that complex milieu of thousands of protein. But you want to know this protein interacts with which other proteins. So you are hoping that this protein, which is protein A, is binding to some other proteins, which is the close interactors, and they are forming a complex. How well you can enrich that complex and try to elute that out. That is the first goal here. And for doing so, you would like to provide non-denaturing conditions so that condition is favorable for the complexes to be formed, and you want to get those complexes eluted out. Therefore, you would like to do this first part in the non-denaturing condition, which is you're not adding any denaturant, which can remove these complex, which is binding from the protein A with other interactors. Once this part has been successfully achieved and you got the pull down with the complex. So for example, you first pass the cell lysate, and then now this protein A is binding with antigen antibody interaction. and hoping that this protein A is already having this other interactors which are binding to that. And then you are trying to pull down. So then after that, you elute out this complex alone. First pass everything will be washed off, wash with the buffer, and then you are only eluting out this particular assembly. Here, just pay attention to these colors, like green and blue colors are directly in touch with protein A. So these could be direct interactors. Whereas the pink one is something which is associated. It may be direct interactor, it may not be direct interactor. It could just be a sticky protein which is linked to the green protein, but not directly associated with the A protein. So therefore, the role of these two proteins could be good interactors. This protein, the pink one, could be just a sticky protein which is just coming as a way of complex. So in all of these kind of interaction studies, you will get large number of interactors. But ideally, there may not be so many interacting partners for that given protein. So what you would like to know, you'd like to identify which of the proteins are obtained from this complex. So then second part you will do, you will denature this complex in the buffer which you run for the SDS page, and then you will add reductant, you will boil the sample, and then you run on the SDS page so that they can all be separated based on the molecular weight. And now the blue one, green one, and or pink one, they're all separated. You can now excise these bands and you can now identify what these proteins are using mass spectrometer. Again, you have to come back to mass spec to identify the protein. Only caveat here is that you may not know which among the three were direct interactors, which ones were indirect interactors. That is something which you will not be able to clarify from this experiment. So therefore, you will still be having a number of proteins, and a large number of those ideally will be direct interactors. Some may be indirect interactors as well. Now, the merits of this kind of experiments are that the proteins you are trying to elute in the native state, interactions you are trying to favor for the natural interaction to happen, and then the large order of the complex cell, the multi-protein complexes can be formed, which you can elute out. However, as I just emphasized, that you may have some sticky proteins which is not direct interactor, but they are indirectly associated with that. Even they might be seen. So you are very much unsure that what you are identifying the set of proteins, which among those are direct interactors, which of those are indirect interactors, or could be sticky proteins. The process will require antibodies and optimization, so could be expensive. Other approaches, you have yeast to hybrid, which you have already studied earlier conventionally. Just again, what you are looking at, you have to do some cloning work here, and you have to look for the the bait and prey interaction to happen. And in the yeast environment, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, that's the favorably used for the doing the yeast to hybrid. And here you are trying to look at how the bait and prey, when these two interact, which is linked to the BD domain and AD domain, then the transcription process could be initiated, which could be monitored with the LAGZ reporter. So this is how you can monitor that if the two are coming close, then the transcription will initiate, and that could be monitored with the LAGZ. So the process is quite known from long time. Conventionally, molecular biologists have been using these two hybrid. However, the problems have been that despite it is applicable to large number of interactions to be observed, but you really identify large libraries and large number of potential interactors. So there is a very high probability of having false positive and negative rates, and therefore you will still be left with hundreds of protein, and you cannot determine very easily which ones are direct interactors, which are just the false positive or false negative. Proteins has to localize and interact in the nucleus in the yeast environment. If you are looking at non-yeast environment, that becomes questionable. Is that going to be favorable for these interactions to happen? These are sensitive to the toxic genes and limited to the pairwise interaction. Some of these are demerits of using yeast to hybrid. Again, as I mentioned, I was just touching upon and refreshing you about the concept of some of the conventional approaches, which is not the what I would like to teach in the proteomics course. I'd like to talk more about the new technologies which is being utilized at the proteome-wide scale for screening, and that's where the protein microarray technology comes into the play. So what are the protein microarrays? These are the glass slides or the nitrocellulose membrane or some sort of substrate which is very miniaturized, on which you can print thousands of proteins. And these proteins or peptides or antibodies, which could be utilized as the protein arrays or peptide arrays or antibody arrays, for various applications in biomarker discovery, protein-protein interactions, functional characterization, etc. So the popular way of starting the protein microarrays was antibody arrays. And here the idea was, if you have the robust antibodies against different proteins of interest, if you can print those antibodies on these substrates or these arrays, then can you, so now this is the array made on which, let's say you got 100 antibodies printed. Then you are, flowing your protein sample of interest or the biomolecules of the interest in samples. And if there is this protein of interest is present, it's going to bind to that antibody. And then you have to use the, different ways of detection that signal. So in some way it is antigen antibody interaction happening. You have already studied that in affinity chromatography. It is just the different way of miniaturize the scale. Here you need much smaller volume of samples, and you can screen the several antibodies or thousands of antibodies in a very short time. Other approach could be that one could look into the protein arrays, where you have the purified proteins printed on these glass slides or the other miniaturized ways of printing, and then you can utilize that for different applications. I'll focus a lot on this part. All this started actually in almost towards the end of 1990 to 2000. That was the time when the genome projects were really getting prominent and large number of sequences getting accomplished. So that was the time when people were thinking that how to utilize now genome-wide information. So I'm just not sharing the slide right now. Let's just talk about it. So that was the main time when large number of EST sequences, different cloning projects, they were all getting accomplished. And for several model organism, a large number of sequences were already available. So it is very easy to synthesize oligos. Once you know the ATGC sequences, it's very easy to synthesize those. And therefore, people started making the oligo arrays, printing the different ways of DNA, cDNA, etc. on the chip, and started using those for different type of genome-wide scale-based applications, genome-wide screening. So that was the beginning of in 1990s to 2000 the time when genome sequencing projects were getting matured, and large number of new applications from the genome arrays were emerging. And that was the time when anything which you are doing on the microarrays can be publication, just because people it's a very novel technology, and first time you are able to screen at the thousands of scale, thousands of genes you are trying to screen. If that is the a decent data, that was a good publication that time easily. As it reaches to 2000 onwards, then of course a lot of competition happened and genome sequences got completed for all the human in fact as well, and many new technologies started emerging as also. But at the time of around 2000 or so, the proteomics community or the protein scientists working in the protein area, they thought the success of the oligo arrays or the micro arrays, genome arrays, can we replicate that at the protein level? And that was the time when it was a thought, can we even print the proteins also and try to repeat the success of the genomic community? So that's where the idea of genome arrays and the move to the proteome arrays. It was Gavin MacBeath from Harvard who was the first one to show experimentally that proteins could be printed on the glass slides or the arrays, and one could try to screen those at the thousands of scales. So it was kind of just a proof of concept paper where they just had two proteins. One was this protein from the showed in the red, and other protein is printed thousands of times throughout the array. And they were able to show the specificity of this particular protein, which is the different protein. You can detect that on the entire thousands of proteins which is printed on the array. So that became one of the proof of concept paper which went to Science quickly, and then that also opened up new opportunities for the proteomics community and the protein scientists to conceive that okay, they can do the protein arrays as well. Immediately while this was happening, Mike Schneider and Heng Yu from the Connecticut Yale University that time, they were having large number of clones of yeast. They thought, why not we do the yeast arrays and try to print all the clones on the miniaturized format, and also look at some of the novel applications. So now proof of concept already published. They made the arrays of yeast, entire proteome of 5000 yeast, 800 proteins, and then they tried to screen for the novel interactors like calmodulin and lipid binding proteins on the entire array surface. That again became the first novel application and got another science paper. So think about when the technologies are developing, and if you are the first one to show, it becomes very easy to go to the top journals. Eventually, Heng Yu, like who was the postdoc that time, and Mike Schneider's lab, uh, when he became independent investigator, he carried this work forward, and now he's at Johns Hopkins. So he then developed the human proteome arrays, which means his lab purified thousands of human protein, which is not an easy task. If you have done some molecular biology work, you will confirm that okay, even purifying one or two proteins is not a straightforward task. In this case, he was actually purifying thousands of proteins. So finally, they purified 17,000 human protein. And for doing so, a lot of automation required, lot of pipeline is required. Everything has to be done in the 96 well plate format. So this entire work of microarray is actually required different thought process and different scale, right? Because we are talking everything at the thousands of scale. So if you do conventional pipetting the way you are doing in the lab, and you are doing, maybe 5, 10, 20 on a given day, you cannot accomplish this thing. So it requires a lot of automation. And with that automation, you can then try to build these kind of arrays. And then again, everything requires high throughput format for screening, for scanning, for data analysis. Everything becomes, at the different magnitude. So therefore, this is not an easy accomplishment to make the human proteome array, but that's what they were trying to accomplish, and they did that with 17,000 human protein, and they also showed that the protein which they have purified, all of them were having GST tag, and finally they could show with the silver stain that they are able to express these proteins, and these are actually pure protein. So that was, one of the good accomplishment to take the things forward. Let me show you. We have the entire setup of protein microarrays in our lab at IIT Bombay. I'll keep showing you glimpses of the parts, bits and pieces here. Let's just show you a microarray printer, which means how to print these slides. What we are talking at the thousands of scale, how this array works. So let's hear from Abhilash, one of the students in the lab.
Okay, so the slide we showed was a eukaryote arrays, right? And in eukaryote arrays, we mentioned that it has 19,000 proteins in duplicates. So overall, the spots is around 45,000. So it covers all human proteome in a single slide. But how to make those slides? It is not very easy to put 45,000 proteins in a single small slide. So for that we have the microarray. This is the microarray printer where we can get a comment of different proteins, and if we give the dimension or location in the microarray printer, it will print those proteins automatically in very precise way. So in this multi-channel bit, we can put the proteins, and we have to mention which protein is present in which well. So accordingly, it will take the proteins and it will print in specific location of the slide. So while doing that, we have to activate the slide first, including some amino acids that will help printing the protein. And once the protein is printed, we have to take care of the slide as well, because it is very kind of sensitive. And once the printing is done, we can take the chain and we can use our microarray code that we showed in the diagram.
All right, so it was a brief demo, but ideally what happens here, like, this is the pin head, where the, 48 pins or, 98 pins, 46 or 98 pins can be there in this particular pin head. And that many spots could be, taken from the plate. If you have purified proteins, let's say 96 well plate format, those pins will go and touch the proteins, and then they will dispense that on different slides. I will show that subsequently the printing in another slide, but this is kind of just setup of the array format. So thanks Abhilash for showing that. Now let's give a little bit conceptual broad view of different type of arrays which can be made using protein arrays based concept. And when we say protein, it could be antibodies, it could be purified proteins, it could be peptides, many things can be possible. So finally, you also want to do the readout of the signal from these arrays, right? So if the target proteins, so let's say I'm just showing you miniaturized arrays and just showing the cartoon, an inset of that, and what is printed on those small, each of those spots. In this case, it's antibodies are printed. And then we want to have the, let's say, the protein is binding to that. And then you want to conjugate that directly with the label for the fluorescence or the tag so that the signal could be detected. So it's like, conventional antigen antibody interaction. Other possibility could be that you have antibody printed and now you are trying to have the target protein which is binding to that. Then a secondary antibody which is going to bind to that complex, and then that is being detected with the secondary antibody with a signal. Could be tyramide signal amplification system, or could be Cy3, Cy5 dyes. So then now it is much more complex reaction, but much more robust binding could be detected using sandwich assays. Other possibility could be that you have printed a tissue on the array, like tissue or the cell lysate on the array, and you want to know what is the abundance of a given protein, and for doing so that you are probing with an antibody of interest. Imagine the case of a prostate cancer, for example, prostate specific antibody PSA is available. Now these clinicians, let's say they got 100 patients, and from those 100 patients sample, they want to know which patients are having higher level of prostate specific antigen PSA. So they will take a small chunk of tissue from these 100 patients, put that on this kind of array format, and then this antibody is floated. If this antibody in that given complex sample from these 100 individuals, wherever it will show binding, that means this higher level of PSA is being seen. Those could be quantified and will indicate that okay, these individuals are at least higher prone for the prostate cancer. So reverse phase protein arrays are quite used for this type of application, but many other biological applications are also being used. Only difference here is that rather than printing antibody or protein, you are actually printing the complex mixture directly on the array, and then you are probing that with the antibody to do the specific signal detection. So these three things which I just showed you, the direct labeling, sandwich immunoassays, and reverse phase arrays, all these three are antibody-based screening methods. Chemical linkage is essentially that you have a purified protein, and now based on the protein chemistry, you want to have some surface chemistry on the substrate so that the proteins can bind to the surface. So you need some chemistry so that proteins could be immobilized, and there are different depending on what substrate you are choosing, depending on what kind of proteins you want to print out. Accordingly, the chemistry can be chosen, and we will talk about different possibilities as we go along. Other possibility could be that from the mass spec type of data, you do not know the entire protein sequences, but you know the exact peptide sequence which is of your interest. And why to actually extrapolate the peptide information to the protein level? Why not specifically look at peptide itself? Like you got, let's say, 5 peptides of a given protein, which were quite potential biomarker for your interest. Why not take those 5 peptides and then synthesize them chemically? Then put them some tag, let's say GST tag, or in this case, and then you can spot those on the array surface. And if you want to utilize the affinity interaction, then you can have the tag with the histidine tag. And if the surface is coated with the nickel NTA kind of chemistry, then nickel and histidine will bind, and therefore the peptides could be conjugated. But that's one way. There are many chemistries to conjugate peptides on the substrates again. So all you're doing is synthesizing peptides of interest obtained from your biomarker experiments, and now you want to print those peptides on the arrays. Other thought could be, can we directly make the proteins from the cDNA? And there are evidences that people are able to express the DNA, cDNA, complementary DNA, directly by adding the in vitro transcription translation mix, which can trigger the transcription process and translation process directly on the chip. And therefore, in the single step, you are able to make the protein from the cDNA. And that is one of the technology which I'll talk in more detail is the NAPA technology, nucleic acid programmable protein arrays. Other approach, similar concept of expressing the cDNA and making the protein is also seen in the PCR based products, which is PCR is very commonly used in molecular biology work. So if you have the polymerase chain reaction and purified PCR product, can we directly print that? On top of that, we add the cell-free system, which is in vitro transcription translation mix, and then express the protein directly on the chip. This one technology known as mist or multiple spotting technique. So broadly, what I spoke so far, I have given you a lot of names. But if this one slide, if you keep in front of you, I'm sure you can answer any possible questions based on all the possible discussion we had so far. There are three technology which we talked are based on antibody-based arrays, like direct labeling approach, sandwich assays, and reverse phase arrays. Remaining ones are based on the proteins. Within those, the chemical linkage is purified proteins, peptide fusion is peptide synthesized. These two are cell-free expression-based methods, nucleic acid program protein arrays, and multiple spotting technique. So these can be utilized more towards understanding the function of the protein. These arrays could be utilized more towards understanding the abundance or how much higher expression you have for a given type of protein. Those could be understood using these type of arrays. So broadly, we have two broad categories: abundance-based arrays, function-based arrays. And function-based arrays means you want to understand the function of the unknown proteins, or you want to better understand the biochemical properties of the given proteins, or how a protein interacts with other proteins, or protein interacts with other drug molecule, or other biomolecules like that. So all those could be studied in this kind of setup. Knowing the increased expression level or abundance of the proteins, that can be better studied in the abundance-based arrays. So let me just show you one experimental setup from the lab with the postdoc Dr. Arup, who will explain one of the experiment directly from the lab of using protein arrays. And let me show you this clip.
secondary antibody on the microarray chip. For 45 minutes, allow the incubation to happen at 140 RPM at room temperature. Make sure that you do not expose the slides to light at any given moment. Now remove the buffer and wash the slide thrice using washing buffer. Now gently take out the slide and put it in dipping buffer. This is done to wash away all the salts that may be over the peptide chip. Use a pressurized stream of nitrogen to completely dry the slides. Finally, we will scan the slide. This is the microarray scanner, GenePix 4000B. We are using manufacturer recommended settings for scanning the slide.
All right. So, you just got some glimpse of how this experiment can be done in the lab. Let me open it up for any questions if you have, and this particular application which was just shown, you have to think about these are the miniaturized arrays on which you are doing some biochemistry, right? Some reactions you are doing. Only difference is you are doing at the very miniaturized scale for the thousands of reaction to happen. So depending on your objective, the type of samples and the reactions will change. Assume here what you have is the peptides or proteins which are printed on the arrays. In this specific application, idea was to look for more of the immune response from the patient's plasma sample. So now if the samples which are like the plasma sample which is which you want to screen, they have potentially the antibodies against the disease of interest. This one particular application, what is being actually done right now on a specialized chip like this is for the COVID project. Idea is whether in these COVID-19 patients, are there some antibodies which are present, which ideally we know that there are. So then can they react on these particular peptides or proteins, and those antigen antibody reaction could be identified for the IgG, IgM, these kind of epitopes. So therefore now you are first probing with the patient's plasma sample, then followed by you are washing it off so that reaction other than non-specific thing which is binding, those can be washed off. And then you want to detect the signal for which you are adding secondary antibody, which is conjugated with Cy3 or Cy5, and then you are going to again wash off and dry the chip and scan the slide. So reaction is very straightforward. It's just that there are multiple steps involved of after each reaction you have to provide sufficient time for incubation, and then you want to wash them off so that anything non-specific can be removed. Again, you want to do the second reaction, provide incubation timing and the right conditions for the incubation to happen or right condition for interactions to happen. Therefore, a lot of optimization goes on. Should you do that at room temperature for 2 hours, room temperature for 5-6 hours, overnight, or 4 degrees? What conditions gives your best signal to noise ratio? It means if there is a very prominent intense signal, but there is a very less background. That's what you'd like to optimize. That's where a lot of initial work goes on for any kind of optimization for these arrays. If there's any questions or clarification you need as of now, up to this point, please ask me now. Then I'll move on to protein arrays, but different type of approaches, which I will start now. Anyone has any doubts about these reaction myths, what we are talking? If all of you are very clear, then let me ask you a question about, let's say we want to make an ideal approach of doing these experiments. What could be those reactions or what could be those arrays which can be the best suitable for you in a very practical way to do your biochemistry on these miniaturized format? In other words, you want to do microarray based experiment, But there are many challenges which you already probably conceive, that you need to purify large number of protein, you need to do many other things to make this microarray experiment work. What can be an ideal array in your approach, in your thoughts, which you can try to take forward for your projects or for your lab work? Do you have any thoughts or any ideas? What should be an ideal array approach for doing your biochemistry? Just put some thoughts. There is no need to have the one right answer. I think there could be
Sir,
multiple possibilities. Yes.
it could be Elisa.
Who is speaking?
Piyush.
Hi, Piyush. So no, I'm not asking for alternate approaches. I'm asking within the array itself, like not Eliza an alternate approach of screening. But I'm saying within what can be your ideal array approach, like what would you like to see in your ideal microarray experiment, which can be less cumbersome but more effective, right? So for example, to get started, you'd like to let's say you are studying a given cancer type. So you'd like to first screen as many proteins possible from that small amount of sample which is available to you, right? Let's say you are looking at patient plasma sample or patient cerebrospinal fluid or some other biological sample, which are very less amount available to you. And from that you want to screen. If you were to do one reaction at a time for each protein, you need large number of sample from these patients which is not available. So now if you want to do the screening, you would like to do that with the minimal volume of the sample. You want to screen maximum number of proteins. So that's one way of thinking about an ideal array, where you should have thousands of features there, and where you can do the screening with a minimal volume. Likewise, what else you think you can utilize? All right, so I'm sure you are still in the mass spec mode, and you know that now we are shifting the technology. So let's quickly go through some of the possible ways of making an ideal arrays. For example, high density, as I just mentioned, that you would like to see as many thousands of proteins or features are printed on this small surface, so that you can screen them with a very minimal volume of the sample available. You'd like to see, can you do multifunctional assays? If you're looking for human protein, then you'd like to see, can you provide the human environment or mammalian milieu, which can be most favorable for those reactions to happen. If you provide bacterial yeast and other stuff, then that might be more favorable for the prokaryotic, not so much for the human samples. And ideally, is there a way that you don't have to purify the protein? I'm talking about ideal array, right? So yeah, the major limitation or the practical hindrance here is that you need to purify each protein at a time, and then only you will get 100 protein or 1000 protein to make the arrays. Is there a way that you don't need to purify the protein and still you can work on the arrays? How long if those proteins which you are purifying will be stable and having integrity? Can you utilize large protein repositories which are available in different parts of the world and try to get as many clones or proteins possible to utilize that? To overcome many of these challenges and to try to build some sort of ideal arrays, a new concept came forward that is known as cell-free expression microarrays. Because all of these properties which I just talked to you is really not possible if you have to purify one protein at a time. And by the time you reach to 17,000 protein, your initial 5,000 protein would have been already degraded by that time, because it takes a while for purifying all kind of proteins, and so much effort goes on to do this activity. Now, as you know that making the cDNA is a much simpler process. So all the genomic work, the DNA, cDNA, they're quite stable, right? So, and there are a large number of repositories available which can easily provide you the clones from which you can extract the plasmid and take these things forward. So there are many technologies on the microarray which are focused on this part. Can we take the the DNA material and utilize that to make the arrays, and then we can try to express that directly on the chip? For example, we add the machinery which makes the central dogma in our body for doing transcription and translation. That is known as in vitro transcription translation mix, IVTT, or cell-free expression system. Can we add directly on the chip with the cDNA, and then that can actually express the proteins of interest? So based on this concept, there are multiple technologies have come forward. I will briefly talk to you each one of those in some detail, but then I will talk mainly on this technology, NAPA, in quite great detail. So protein in situ arrays or the PISA. This concept, as now we are talking about the arrays, and I was trying to give you the idea that what was happening in around 1990 to 2000, and this paper came in 2001. That is the time when people were actually trying to conceive that how different type of array technologies could be built, which could be high throughput, which could be used for proteins, and also it could be simpler in approach. So here the concept was, can we use the affinity chromatography based concept and utilize those on the arrays? For example, in affinity chromatography, if you are, which you have read, I'm sure some of you would have done the experiment as well. When you have the, gene of interest, which is having histidine tag, and now you are passing, that with the nickel NTA column, and then if this particular protein is expressing the histidine tag, it's going to bind to the nickel 6 nickel, 6 histidine tag will bind to the nickel NTA, and finally that complex could be eluted out, and you can get the purified protein. That is a very conventional affinity chromatography. Likewise, here the idea was, can we have our clones of interest, which is having a histidine tag, and on my glass slide or the surface, if we print the nickel NTA material, if the DNA which is already having histidine tag, if you add transcription and translation mix, after that reaction, the protein is synthesized, and that protein contains histidine tag. And this histidine tag containing protein, when it comes on the touch with the nickel NTA surface, it's going to bind with the histidine tag, and therefore now you are actually going to end up with the proteins which is having the histidine tag, and those proteins could be formed on the array known as protein in situ array. This was a very novel concept that came immediately at that time in 2001, and there were a lot of interest here because it is shown that you are not purifying the proteins. It was quite rapid process. Since you are using the affinity chromatography type of interaction, affinity interaction, it is going to be specific protein attachment with the nickel and histidine interaction, and soluble proteins are formed. The demerits were that while doing this immobilization process, you might lose the protein function. Also, the large volume of the cell-free lysate or in vitro transcription translation mix was required to make this particular reaction to happen, which could be costly and having stability challenges. Other approach was mist or multiple spotting technique. Here idea was people are amplifying the genes of interest in PCR reactions. Can you take those unpurified PCR products, print those on the array surface, and then on top of that you add the in vitro transcription translation mix, and then you provide the right incubation conditions so that the proteins can be expressed directly from the unpurified PCR product, and that could be then taken forward for the reactions to happen. So this was another concept which was also very novel, and that was showed that even without purifying the PCR product, one could directly try to take those unpurified DNA products, use them as a template, and by doing so, then you can amplify large number of clones which is of your interest, and easily you can then develop the high density protein arrays. Demerits were like, since on the same position, like whatever position you are taking, first you are adding the DNA, and then on top of that you are doing second printing to keep the IVT mix, in vitro transcription translation mix. So therefore, the protein printing could be cumbersome, and it may result into non-specific protein binding. It may also result into loss of signal intensity with the very prolonged incubation timing. And overall, it was time-consuming process with a lot of non-specific signals being detected. Other technology came forward was DAPA, which was published in Nature Methods, DNA arrays to protein arrays. It took a blend of concepts, essentially the affinity chromatography concept to have the nickel NTA there. But then they realized that if you are printing the DNA on the chip, and then you are expressing the DNA with the IVT mix, then making the protein. So there is so much, material already printed on the array, which is from the cDNA, which will interfere with your reactions and signal. So can you do something else? Can you make first the DNA template slide, and then you add the IVT mix, which will make the DNA to convert to them to the protein form. And so the DNA will change to RNA, RNA will change to protein. That will entirely happening with the IVT mix, which happens for, that you have to take the words. And that was developed already for the protein purification based work, for the difficult to purify proteins, especially membrane proteins like that, with the crystallographers who try to purify some of the complex proteins. That idea was taken for all these self-free expression based arrays, that can we take that IVT mix and take the DNA templates and make the proteins directly on the chip. In this case, now they are starting with one DNA slide, making the proteins from the after adding the IVDT mix, and then they use the permeable membrane from which only the proteins will pass. And now, therefore, all the DNA which was on the first slide is not going to come and pass the membrane. Only the purified protein or the expressed protein is actually passing from that membrane. And that will be now touched to the second slide, which is having the nickel NTA coated on the array. Therefore, now this purified proteins are going to come and bind to this particular chip surface. And that you will see that, with the nickel NT-histidine binding is happening. And you are only ending up with the purified protein array. You don't have any other material printed on the chip. So this is a very novel concept, very ideal way of making arrays. And in this case, one same DNA template slide could be utilized to print multiple slides, 3-4 slides easily. With one expression is sufficient to print multiple chips for the proteins. So that's where it has some of the novelty, that one could reuse this DNA template array to make multiple slides. At the end, as you have seen, that's only purified proteins are coming out. So the pure proteins are being generated. And DNA template array could be stored for the long duration. So the DNA which you printed on the base slide, the first slide, that could be stored. And only when you want to utilize for the protein arrays, then you have to do the second type of printing. Demerits were when you are passing it from the permeable membrane, it's going to broaden the spots due to the diffusion. If there is a multimeric protein complexes are formed, they may not be able to pass. And the overall process was time consuming and costly. So these were some of the challenges of using the DAPA array. Let's move on to another approach, which is the HaloTag arrays. This is something which is the company Promega. They commercialize this arrays. Now there are many vendors, but this was the initial years when the technologies were being developed. And idea is that Promega is the key player of making the IVDT mix, the in vitro transition mix, which I am telling to you. They were already developing that for the protein purification work, for the crystallography work. They thought, okay, protein array technologies are developing. We already have our IVDT mix. They also had the HaloTag, which they were using for the protein purification work. They thought, why not combine all our ingredients and try to come up with the commercialized HaloTag arrays, right? So that's where the concept here was that the HaloTag, which is 33 kilodalton engineered derivative of bacterial hydrolase. If on the chip you have the chloroalkane, HaloTag goes and binds very strongly covalently with the chloroalkane, and therefore that is very strong interaction being generated. So they took this idea and they thought, okay, in the cDNA, can we have the HaloTag expressed? Like you can add any tag of interest at the time of cloning. GST tag you have heard, and you have heard the histidine tag, and likewise you can add the HaloTag as well. So let's say this particular gene of interest now contains HaloTag. And now after doing the protein expression work with the IVDT mix, you synthesize the protein which contains this yellow colored HaloTag. Now on the surface, you have the HaloTag ligand, which is chloroalkane, which is going to bind to this particular HaloTag strongly. So therefore, any protein which is expressed which contains HaloTag will be forming on the array surface, like affinity chromatography concept, which we spoke earlier. But here the major advantage was this interaction of HaloTag with the HaloTag ligand is very strong and like a very covalent bond interaction. And in the microarray experiment, which you have briefly seen the video, that the steps are, many steps are involved. A lot of washing goes on. At the end, drying goes on. So during all these processes, if the binding is not very strong, you may lose a lot of signal from the arrays. And therefore, you would like to have this kind of strong interactions. So major merit of this particular array approach was to have the strong covalent bonding between the protein and ligands. No material loss was observed during the washing. Since the HaloTag and the chloroalkane will be in a given orientation, so capture of the protein is oriented. No non-specific adsorption. They have also used the PEG, polyethylene glycol, or other coating on the slide, so that anything non-specific will not bind to the slide. Easy to quantify the signal, and they had made very miniaturized template in which any small lab which is not having the printing and those kind of facilities, they can take the gasket and just simply do this simple pipetting of these HaloTag based clones and make their own arrays with their gasket which they provide with the chip. So therefore, you don't need a microarray printer. And all that was because to make it successful for the commercialization purpose. Few possible demerits are possible loss of function on the binding to the hello tags, and high throughput application if you want to do, then these hello tag based clones has to be optimized to print on the array, which was not shown. They were showing to with the very miniaturized and small scale printing for the labs to do on their own without having the array. Let me now move on to the last technology, but this is I'm going to talk more detail. And during the process, I'll talk to you intricacies of microarray work as well. It just happened that I had worked in the same group at Harvard, which developed this technology known as NAPA, nucleic acid programmable protein arrays. And that work was quite a breakthrough at that time in 2004, published in Science. Idea was that, the thousands of spots which are shown here, if you just enlarge one of those and look at the insert of this particular complex, what is present in that spot. So here the cDNA contains a GST tag. So let's say for all of this work which you have seen, some tag you are adding in the cloning itself. So these these clones contain the tag GST tag. And whatever tag you are adding, the same antibodies also you want to keep along with that. For example, anti-GST antibody, BSA protein, and BS3 cross-linker. All of these things were mixed in a tube, and then that you were pipetting that complex mixture of these four material on the spot here. Why we are doing that? That you will listen as I go along. Idea here is, if you add now IVDT mix, in vitro transcription translation mix here, this particular cDNA which contains GST tag may synthesize the protein if the reactions happen well, and then this protein should contain ideally the GST tag. If the antibody is available, which is anti-GST antibody or the capture antibody, then the protein containing GST tag will bind to the anti-GST antibody. So now what you are looking at, you are having a gene of interest which is having the tag, which is GST tag, but how to, and you are talking about thousands of genes of interest here, not one. So, and you want to convert your cDNA to the proteins of interest and develop into the protein arrays. So now if the antibody is also printed with this, but only one antibody, you're not looking at protein specific antibody, you're looking at the tag specific antibody, right? So GST tag, anti-GST antibody is printed here, and therefore if any gene or clone of interest will express the GST tag, will bind to the neighboring capture antibody. For this particular complex to adhere well on the surface, somehow BSA, bovine serum albumin, helped a lot for the complex mixture to get adhered strongly on the array surface. BS3 is a cross-linker which helps the antibody to bind to the array surface. So therefore, these two are the associated material which is helping the complex to bind very strongly to the surface. But reaction is happening between these two only. The gene of interest is this, containing GST tag, and now you are going to express those with the IVDT mix, which is forming these proteins of interest, and that is getting adhered and bind to the capture antibody. Imagine that you had used the flag tag in this case. Then you might use the anti-flag antibody, and that again the flag tag is expressed here, and anti-flag will bind to that. For that purpose, you can even think about a MIG tag. You can think about a histidine tag. So therefore, the reaction and assembly remains same, but the concept of utilizing this approach can be based on the availability of your tags and antibody. Any questions on the NAPA arrays or any type of cell-free expression array which we have spoken so far? Given that now I'm going to talk in more detail about NAPA technology, I hope the base concept is clear to you. What we are talking is, without purifying the proteins of interest, can we utilize the cDNA clones available in the lab? There are a large number of repositories which can provide you the glycerol stock of the cDNA clones very easily, very cheap. Let's say you are the one who want to do the microarray experiment in your lab at IIT Bombay. Your lab does not have the prior, the entire high throughput printing and those kind of exposure, and you are interested in making an array of 1,000 genes of interest. So first you choose which 1,000 genes which you need. Now you go to one of the repositories, MGC clone is there, Arizona State University, Harvard, there are multiple clone repositories that are available. You can then write to them, this is my plate maps. I want 10 plates, each of 100 of clones or 96 clones of interest, and all of them containing GST tags. They will send you this material with very minimal cost. And now you can, verify these. You can get those cDNA and you can print those on the chip. Now the next thing is something which is what I'm talking to you, how to print those on the arrays and what kind of reactions to be done, which you can use to make the NAPA arrays. So if this concept is clear, then I think rest of the slides will be easy to follow for you. Major advantages what we can see with this approach why that led to the science paper was essentially there was no need to express and purify the protein separately. You are providing the IVT mix, which is helping for the natural folding of the protein to happen. You are printing the arrays, storing them, and whenever you want to do the experiments of your biomarker based or interaction based, then you can just add the IVT mix at the time of the experiment, and therefore you don't have to store the purified proteins. Rather, you can make the protein very fresh, like it's like baking a pizza at the time when you want to eat. And shelf life is not going to be an issue because you are going to keep these cDNA, which is very stable material, stored on the printed on the slides and stored those in the just kind of moisture free condition. Whatever clones cDNA you have access, all of that could be made into the protein form. Since you are utilizing these kind of approaches with the antibody, your capture is going to be very strong and very specific, because if the clone of interest is expressing the protein and that protein will should have the GST tag, then anti-GST and capture antibody will bind to that strongly, and therefore you will have very good control of the proteins actually expressing, and those are being captured on the antibody. It can retain the functionality of the traditional protein arrays, and these arrays are quite stable on the bench until you are adding the IVT mix and providing the incubation conditions for reactions to happen. Of course, there are still demerits. If you do not have access to the clone, then you have to first do the cloning, you have to add those GST tag, and you have to reach that number before you can make the arrays. Major drawback here was the pure proteins were not produced. For example, the cDNA is materials printed on the array, antibodies printed on the array, and when now you are expressing the proteins, even the proteins are being made, still you have the reminiscent of the antibodies and the your DNA which is printed. So those may even produce some of the non-specific signal, and that was one of the major advantage which you saw in the 2008 paper of the DAPA technology, DNA arrays to protein arrays technology, that had overcome this process because they are actually moving from one substrate slide to multiple purified protein array slides. In this case, peptide tags may lead to some steric hindrances, which may lead to the binding domain being not seen properly. And whether you are still able to produce a functional protein can remain a question which you can ask me or I can ask you depending on the time. Okay, so let me just walk you through the workflow of NAPA, and then at the end maybe we can take the question of whether what proteins are being produced, is that functional or not. So the concept was quite novel, and idea was to utilize the setup which could be utilized by any molecular biology lab. Can we have this setup and assembly really kind of very basic and simple, which anybody is interested to look at high throughput protein interaction work can try to come up with those approaches and develop these chips. So I'll show you the stepwise things for the NAPA arrays. But before I go to a lot of complexity, let me tell you, like, whatever clone repositories you have access, you can easily get all those clones. And if you have good robust printing chemistry and high throughput capability, it's very straightforward to do this kind of array based work. And ideally for the NAPA arrays, you have to follow these following steps. First thing is what should be printed on the array, right? And that is true for any type of microarray based experiment. What should be our array design, experimental planning? Can we select what type of substrate surface will be there? What kind of printing chemistries to be used? Then you are going to culture those clones, purify the DNA, concentrate the DNA. Then you have to resuspend that in the the buffer which will be utilized for the spotting the DNA on the slides. Then you have to do the printing, and followed by various type of control quality control checks, and then only you are ready for looking at any reaction which you would like to proceed for these applications. So what I'm going to show you, like a handmade video, which was just very roughly made for something that time when I was doing my postdoc at Harvard, and it just shows you the steps of NAPA technologies, but the actual setup, how you need a high throughput assembly. So I'll keep explaining you the steps. Let me mute the audio. Okay. So first of all, you need this kind of large cloning repositories. What I'm showing you the actual experimental setups here. This is one of the biobank, which is automated repository, which is actually having thousands of clones. And when you are doing your experiment in the lab, your own lab, then you are actually many times you are taking out the whole plates or whole boxes and thawing everything before you can take out one which is of your interest, which you cannot afford in this kind of case when you have thousands of clones stored in the same biobank. So idea is, if these are each one of these tubes are barcoded, and you know which gene which is of your interest, you enter that barcode, and only that one tube will come out of this entire complex. Which let me show you again so that you can slightly appreciate. Let me just go back. So this part which I'm talking to you, this will have thousands of clones, but if you are only entering the barcode for that one clone of interest, only that one tube will come out of these thousands clones. So then likewise, you can select and see which genes of your interest. Then you have to add those, the GST tag or MIC tag, whatever you want. And then these are the high throughput PCR system. You see like, maybe 10, 12 PCR systems are kept. And all you have to do the things in the, the plate, which is all 96 well plate format. So the scale is very different. And I'll try to give you the glimpse of it for you to appreciate that what we are talking is very doable, which you do in the lab. But the scale is different and thought process is different. You have to go beyond one tube process and think about things in 96 well plate format. Every reaction is happening here, which is a 96 well plate format. So you can do 96 clones you can take, and you are amplifying those with the PCR, and you can do maybe for at least 1100 or 1200 12 plates simultaneously in these many instruments which is available, right? So once you have done the cloning and you have the clones which is contains the GST tag or MIC tag or flag tag, any of your interest, so again every step is being done in an automated way with lot of robotic setup, lot of liquid handling setup. So now you are growing these, you want to make the glycerol stock on the LB agar plate, for example. Rather than doing it manually, one streak on each of these small Petri dishes, everything is done here in the automated manner with the 96 well plate format. You take this LB agar plate, and now you have these 96 clones of interest, and you are actually plating them on this kind of agar plate. With this, all you have to know the orientation of the plate map. What was your first clone? What was your 96th clone? And now after dipping the liquid on this particular plate, you can just orient yourself. You can mark what was the first and what is the 96th, and you already have the plate map in your file. So later on, once this is growing, you will know what was your entire 96 genes of interest which you'd like to take forward. But right on, just imagine in a couple of minutes time what you are doing. You're actually delivering the things for thousands scale. So now your you plated these 96 genes of interest onto these particular LB agar plate, and now you want to purify the DNA from these colonies. And again, you need another automated setup which is going to do the DNA prep for you. But I'm sure each one of you have done the DNA prep, but that is at the different scale. You have done in the small tubes at one at a time. But the same thing cannot be miniaturized here. And now these particular deep well plate, what you see there, that is already having the silica chemistry, which will be binding to the DNA from the lysates. And then you will pass on the different buffer to elute out, and then finally you can get the clean DNA. The same buffer and reaction which you use in the tubes will be utilized here in the 96 well plate format. And all this automation just makes the life so simple that even a simple technician, which is just not even BSc, could be simply able to do 1000 DNA purification in a day very happily, easily, with lot of coffee breaks and going and talking to each other. Because once the program is set, we can set it up. It will do 30 minutes, all these steps, and then you come back, and then now you change the plate. All you have to do, you have to change the plate. This is a plate where your 96 genes are there, which you want to make the DNA. So again, this just probably gives you different mindset of thinking about the high throughput work. Once you get all these DNA purified, you'd like to quantify that, are you getting the sufficient DNA over there or not? Again, quantification being done not in the tubes but in the plate format. Different dyes are being added, And now you are going to do those reactions in the again 96 well plate format, so that you can read the entire DNA quantification in these type of plates. Once you are happy that you are able to purify sufficient DNA and you got sufficient quantity of those genes of interest, then only you are ready for the next set of experiment to make your printing reaction to happen for the Napa arrays. So next will be, now you have sufficient DNA for each one of these genes of interest, and you want to add the printing mix into the plate, and now you want to print the array. So I'll now show you the detail of the printing. In this case, let's say there are 4 plates we kept here on the deck. Each one of these are having 384 small dots. So 384 well plate. So it means on one deck, at a time, easily you can keep almost almost 1200 genes of interest, and you are maintaining the humidity and temperature, everything inside well. And now this particular part, which is the pin, robotic pin, which is going to take the liquid or the, let's say, 384 genes of interest, and the 90 slides are kept on this particular deck. So now this particular robotic arm is going and collecting, dipping the pins inside this particular plate of the genes of interest, then going and printing on all the 90 slides the same genes, 90 times. Just goes one, printing 90 times in all the slides. Then after that, it goes to this part, which is the washing station, and then you want to wash the printing head so that whatever you have printed the first time, those carryover should not come. So you will wash sonicate twice in the washing chamber, and then this plate could be, this printing head could again come back and do next set of printing. So now in this way, you are able to print thousands of things, just in overnight printing. And now you make your own homemade array, which is you have hundreds of arrays printed. You can do n number of samples and patients and screening. Now what you see is the practical way of doing this experiment. So this is the Napa assembly. Now we want to add the IVDT mix. In vitro transcription translation mix you want to add on the array. So let's say this technician is adding this particular gasket on the printed slide. So you have done the printing, you have all the cDNA and the anti-GST antibody, all of that mixed in the printing each spot, and likewise you have thousands of spot printed. You have added this plastic assembly, and now you are adding this IVDT mix. Actually, this IVDT mix is made from the, in this case, made from the rabbit reticulocyte lysate, because that provides the ribosome material, and along with that the amino acid mixtures are being added. So all you are doing, you are adding the transcription and translation mix on top of these proteins that are printed, or the genes which are printed on the chip, right? And then both these sides, then now you are sealing that, the edges, and with the capillary action, everything has actually moved inside all these spots. So what you are trying to do, you are trying to generate that condition so that the reaction can happen, and you are going to incubate that in the right temperature so that the proteins can be synthesized. This is another slide, and see how simple this process is. You are just simply adding IVDT mix, simply rolling it down from your thumb. The entire all the spots which are printed there now will have the the things floated from the IVDT mix. Then you seal the edges from the top and bottom, and likewise easily simply in couple of minutes 15-20 slides can be prepared. And now what you are looking at, is starting from the cDNA based assembly, you are going to now make the proteins on the chip in just 2 hours time, and those proteins can now be utilized for next set of biomarker screening projects. So the process is conceptually quite robust if you can develop the expertise. Now what you see, how many slides, like almost 15-20 slides are being kept just in a couple of minutes time, and then you are incubating them at 37 degrees temperature. That is optimum to induce this reaction to happen, and therefore from the DNA the proteins are going to be expressed. The next is that there is a lowering of the temperature, which actually helps the expressed protein to get and bind and capture to the antibody of interest, and that is going to help that reaction to happen. So in 1.5 hour time, this cDNA is going to synthesize the protein, and you will end up with the proteins of interest. Let me reach out till the end of the video. Yeah, so this much we have seen. So once you have done this particular reaction, after this, let's say you want to screen for the patient serum sample or other type of interaction to happen, you will do those, and then you can scan the slides and you can look at the slide. Or first you want to just look at the quality of the chip itself, or what kind of printing you have seen. So now you're scanning the slide, and what you see, those spots which show that the printing quality was good. I hope that gives you at least the idea for each of these steps. Now I'll be much faster and quicker to go through the remaining of my slide. A lot of content to be covered, but since I have explained you visually, now it will be easy for you to follow what we are talking, right? So we want to print the slides. For doing that, we have to think about multiple things. What type of slide we should take? Glass slide, gold slide, lighter-cellulose membrane. What can be the chemistry which I want to utilize for doing that? What I would like to print? You are looking at autoimmune disease, you are looking at cancer, you are looking at COVID. Depending on what you are looking at, your array layout will change. The kind of gene which you would like to select for doing this experiment will be based on your experimental design objectives. It will be different for different people. Array planning is very important. First step. Right type of control to be selected, right type of gene to be selected. All of that happens computationally by informatics work. Then you think conceptually what chemistry you would like to utilize, and depending on that, your clone should have those tags. Then you purify the DNA and then you mix those and you are ready to do the printing. So I'll now elaborate on each of these steps with some details, intricacies, so that you can appreciate how much it goes on to do these experiments. First, you're looking at what type of target proteins you'd like to print, what type of density can you achieve, like you'd like to print 40,000, 1 lakh spots, how many you'd like to print, what spacing you'd like to see, what can be the plate map, the GAL file, the layout of the arrays, what kind of robotic parameters you'd like to utilize for array to be printed. All of that will be part of the first part. Again, I'm showing the actual data set obtained from the our internal work and some work which I've done earlier. This is an Excel sheet which shows that, okay, this is my plate map for a deep well block plate of 96 genes of interest. Now this 96 gene, I have prepared these plasmids, and now I'm going to purify the DNA. I'm going to further print those on the array. I want the array to look like this. Every spot to be printed in duplicate. Every spot I want to be printed in duplicate, like this GST spot or non-spot. Every spot in duplicate, and not so close to each other. Like in this case, you see this spot is slightly far off from this spot. So if there is any neighboring effect, anything diffusion happen, then that will minimize this process. Again, you are keeping it diagonal. Based on this, now this particular plate could be utilized to generate something like this. You can have multiple time printings of the same spots, and you can increase the density, and more number of features could be screened. Additionally, now you have to look into what kind of block you want to make. It can be 6 by 6, it can be 8 by 8, it could be 10 by 10, depending on your overall printing, what you would like to achieve. Accordingly, you can work on this. And all of this work you are doing in Excel sheet format. Then you will give this instruction to the to the software, what kind of the parameter you would like to utilize for the printing. Again, these are the spot 8 will be in diagonal like this, spot 11 will be diagonal like that. And then you are selecting the clones of interest, as I showed you in those the gene bank. You are culturing those expression clones on these LB agar plates. Everything is automated. Everything can be done in just a couple of minutes time. Thousands of things these can be screened. These kind of actual liquid handler and the robotic setup could be utilized for very quick, fast way of making the deep well block for growing these plasmids. And then you would also want to test out the quality of each one of the purified DNA which you have obtained for each one of the gene of interest. Again, can you look into the small agarose which you run conventionally in the lab? That may not be a good thing to do. In this case, 192 lanes are there, and one could use these robotic printer. All these plate, it will just quickly go take that many sample and quickly load those on the gel, go again and take the next set of the sample and load that again. To avoid the spillover from the one to other lane, the wells are made slightly diagonal, so that two spots, or like you can see one is up and one is down kind of thing, so that there is no spilling over coming from one well to other well. So very quickly now you are able to visualize that you have these 192 genes of interest which are actually have you got good quality of DNA, and they're ready for the printing. Again, everything what when you are doing the cloning work or you are picking the colony, all of that could be automated. All of that is actually being automated. Even this part to pick up a colony, some of you have done the cloning, and you will realize that it requires some manual eyes and intervention to look for the best, not very crowded and single colony to pick up. But in this case, a video is being actually put over there, which identifies the right density and then looks for the single colony and captures that. Everything automated. You are not utilizing too much on the human time, but rather all the instrumentations are doing things automated manner. So picking up the bacterial colonies by robotic picker. Now you are making those deep well block plates. I've already shown you in the video how to do this DNA prepping now. Multiple plates in the single kind of assembly setup you can easily do. These are all 96 blocks. 300, 400 DNA purification could be done in just 1 or 2 hours time. Second thing comes the what type of surface chemistry you would like to utilize. What will be your end goal application? What the objectives you have? Gold is very ideal, but of course very costly. That's why gold is not preferred to do the 1000 hour screening. When we do surface plasma resonance SPR based work, then we do only on the gold surface. Glass is most commonly being used, but also people use nitrocellulose membrane or hydrogel. If you look at different parameters, cost-wise, glass is the cheapest one and then quite favorable. Reactivity-wise, gold is the low, like least reactive, so that's it will have less non-specific interaction. That's just more preferred. Others will show some non-specific absorption, non-specific reactivity. And then you will have the mass spec compatibility. If you take out the features from the gold surface, that's more compatible for the mass spec based application. Here in the other glass and nitrocellulose, it's very strongly adhered. You cannot strip off easily, and therefore you cannot, even if you see interactions are happening, you cannot take those out and identify from mass spec what are the known proteins. So that's where the limitations are there. Different type of kinase, let's say they're looking for phosphorylations are possible on some of these specific assembly like nitrocellulose membrane. So the chemistry which we are talking about, Napa chemistry, thought was to make it very user friendly so that anybody can do in their labs. So you have the cDNA which contains GST tag. Now you want to put that on the glass slide. So you can do multiple ways. You can do the UV cross linking. You can use the silicon-based chemistry. I'll talk about more silicon-based chemistry, which is more robust. For example, what we are talking here, if you coat your glass slide with aminosilane, one chemical, which will now add the the amino group on your surface on the glass slide, and then the DNA which you have purified is having the negative charge. So with that interaction of positive and negative, now DNA when put on the top of the aminosilane coated slide is going to quickly adhere with the positive negative interaction. So therefore this became a very straightforward way of coating the slide. For doing that, biochemically what you do, you take the glass slides, take acetone, aminosilane chemical, metal racks in which you would like to place these slides, and rocking shaker on which you would like to do this reaction to happen. Again, very simple setup. You can keep 30 slides like this. In this particular tank, you can add the acetone, which contains 2% aminosilane. You put on the rocking shaker. After half an hour, the reaction is complete. You simply wash them off with the acetone. Just change that, put this particular assembly to the next tank, which contains only acetone. And then you wash off each one of these particular slide and dry them up. If you were to make yourself, you're hardly spending maybe 1.5 to 2 hours time to make 30 slides functionalized with the aminosilane chemistry. If you were to buy this commercially, they will cost you $100 something per slide. All they are doing is simple reaction, add aminosilane and acetone and dip those uniformly, wash them off and then dry them up. That's all, right? But if you know it and you can do it, you don't have to rely on the commercial makes too much. Now, if you are looking at the Napa chemistry, you are going to make the reaction mix, which contains multiple things I already mentioned earlier. It can say DNA of your interest with the GST tag, an antibody like anti-GST in this case, the GST tag is there, BSA protein and BS3 cross-linker. So again, in a tube, you are going to add these chemicals. I'm not going to nitty-gritty of it. Some of you might be keen to follow this experiment and work. For you, those details are there, that how you can do this pipetting and those reactions. After that, we have this kind of plate map made in the Excel, which we are now giving to the software for going to do the printing. We will check all the parameters for printing, that the temperature should be uniform, humidity is kept below 65, pins are clean, how many pins we are going to use for the printing, what should be my array map density, printing parameters, how much time it should go and put on the stamping on the slide, how much time you give for washing. All those parameters has to be optimized, and then you are going to print those slides, and you have seen how to print the slides. After that, you want to express the proteins of interest, and that's where I think you need a little bit more detail. For example, what we are adding on top of the CDN, which is already printed on the arrays, you are adding this reaction mix. This contains reticulocyte lysate obtained from the rabbit, which provides the ribosome machinery. On top of that, you are adding T7 polymerase, amino acid mixtures, and the amino acid which comes commercially does not come with the entire thing together. So usually they come with at least one less, so that one could add exogenously with some label. So in this case, let's say amino acid mixture is minus methionine. You add also amino acid mixture without leucine or cysteine, and then they mix together so that you represent all the amino acids. Ribonucleases to remove any kind of no RNA is being degraded, and then this entire reaction makes very simple. You just add all that and put that on one slide, which I have shown you in the video how you can add on the Napa slide, and those could be spread like this, what we have already seen. Incubate that not 37, actually 30 degrees clarified here, and then followed by 15 degrees capture temperature. Based on this, the proteins will be best expressed on these slides. And then when you are doing expression experiments, you will follow that what my spot assemblies are, how I'm going to look for those on my printed slides. In this slide, you are just looking at the quality of the slides, and you can see the spots look pretty decent, and these ones are the purified GST proteins. This is an experiment which is you are looking for biomarker discovery, and P53 protein is quite expected to express in these breast cancer patient samples. And P53 protein, you can see this expression is very humongous coming in all of these samples, in all of these patient samples. Yeah. Qualities of arrays are very important to ensure when you want to do this kind of microarray experiment, because if you start with the bad quality array, you will end up with the bad quality data. You want this kind of good spot morphology, clean. You don't want this kind of donuts effect. You don't want this, the neighboring spilling effect, and you don't want this kind of spot morphology. So you have to pay attention to these things. Lot of quality control checks goes on to make sure the duplicate spots are good, spots morphologies are good, reproducibility is there, printing quality is proper, cleaning is done well. And for entire of these things, lot of automation required, lot of strict tracking is required. Good lab notebooks, maintaining good barcodes, entire procedure requires sort of careful work, and then you can talk at the scale of thousands, right? And now you can produce these printing. Again, if you have done printing in different batches, you need to check out the quality of the batches. Like this batch and this batch is not exactly uniform. You can see there is some gap here in this batch, which is not in this batch. So likewise, you have to be also cautious about how good your batches are. Let's say now you want to express, test out the protein expression on the array, and you want to say, okay, like, all the proteins are expressing with a GST tag. What if I use a specific antibody like P53, can it pick up only P53 gene, which has made the protein now? And so now in this case, when we probe the entire array with an anti-P53 antibody, only the P53 proteins are showing binding, which ensured that protein specific expression could be seen on these arrays. Despite they are having thousands of protein, only those proteins are having P53 protein expressed, only binding with anti-P53 antibody. So lot of QC check goes on for comparing the signals before you can actually move on to the biomarker discovery program. Spot to spot variability, slide to slide variability, day to day variation, all of these being plotted to ensure that we are looking into the right type of technology. Let me just show you a quick clip of Josh Lebert, who is the main inventor of the Napa technology.
One of the tools that my lab uses to look for early markers of disease is to look for antibodies that respond to proteins displayed in those diseases. Cancers produce proteins that get displayed to the immune system, and our immune systems respond to that. And so in a sense, our own immune systems act as sentinels that identify the presence of disease proteins, and we can pick those antibodies up and use them to diagnose the disease. Now, historically, the way my lab has done this is we've printed genes on a chip, a little microscopic chip, and then express those genes into proteins. What's changed for us in a big way in the last year is this development of this human lysate from HeLa cells from Thermo Fisher, which completely has been a game changer for us. We're making probably 10 times more protein than we've ever made before. And I think from my perspective as a chief investigator in a lab, what's really been powerful is that every batch of that product has been the same. Historically, the cell-free extracts that we've been getting vary. Each time you get a different batch, it's behaved a little bit differently. And so we've had to adjust our methods, or we couldn't compare current results to old results. But this new product is the same every time we get it. And so it's allowed us to do a lot more experiments, be more reliant on those experiments, and actually have better signals from those.
All right, so he is Dr. Josh Lebert. He is the one of the key pioneers in the field of protein microarrays, and my mentor at Harvard earlier. Now he has moved to Arizona State University, a Biodesign Institute, where he's director currently, and they're developing many innovative ways of arrays, both label-based and label-free kind of technologies. All right, so I have still to talk a lot, but given the time which we have already finished now, I'll talk about some of the applications of these type of arrays in the next class, and also I'll talk about some of the label-free biosensors and other omics revolutions, and give you some tips for the exam and the NSEM part in the next class. Idea is that there are many possibilities of making arrays. I think today's lecture probably will illuminate you that there is a world beyond mass spectrometers as well, which is also quite strong and quite robust and quite developed, and there are multiple approaches of making those arrays. From thinking about from peptides to the antibodies to the purified proteins to the cDNAs of interest using MISC, NAPA, DAPA, a lot of technology, PISA is all available. And if you can take that first bold step of thinking to develop your own arrays, then functionalization to making arrays to printing, everything is possible, and you can then really achieve the high throughput at scale with very low cost. And you can then screen for hundreds of patient samples. Where the major bottleneck comes for the microarray technology is the availability of these chips. If let's say you have printed 200 chips with good quality, then of course you can very quickly move on to the 200 patient sample screening. A big project you can accomplish in a very small cost, but all that steps require a lot of rigor and a lot of knowledge and a lot of insight about knowing these technologies. So we'll talk about some of the applications using protein arrays, and also talk to you that how one could go without label-based strategies and try to detect signal using label-free format in the next class. Is there any question? I'll be happy to take any questions or comments now. Anyone want to ask any question? Ashi, is everything clear? Anusuya, Aparna, Arko?
Yes, sir.
Devanshi? A lot of new terminologies, new concepts, new things overwhelmed to all of you in a short time. I hope the pace was sufficient for you to follow it up. If anything is unclear, please do even write to me separately if you want to, and or clarify me in the next class. I'll put the recordings in the YouTube channel, and you can watch that when you get time. Okay, we'll stop it here, and everyone enjoy your Diwali festival tomorrow, Diwali celebrations. But we'll meet again on Friday for the last class, which will have a lot more details and exciting technologies. Okay, thank you very much. We'll stop here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Happy Diwali.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Happy Diwali, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Happy Diwali.
Thank you, sir. Happy Diwali.
Bye.